There's Maria. Right. Okay, so thanks everyone for coming. And this knowledge share is sponsored by Qualsy. Qualsy's AI integrated self-guided platform facilitates consumer engagement across various activities, perfect for independent researchers conducting remote qualitative studies with enhanced intimacy and scalability. So I'd like to thank both Nicki and Pam for doing this presentation. And if you've got questions, do you want to put them in the chat? And thank you, Susan. And then we'll decide whether we're going to do them during the talk or afterwards. And then we can always have a chat afterwards. So if I can ask you all to mute yourselves, apart from our speakers, which I think you all have. So I will. And over to you, ladies. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, I think I'm going to share my screen. Can you all see the fun little kids?
Okay.
Good, good. So we're here today to talk about getting many consumers with maximum opinions, the best practices in monitoring with kids and teens. It's a short presentation, kid size, you might say. We're doing it. So Nicki and I have both worked together. I think both collectively, we have like a long, like 50 years collectively of experience working with kids, like the gray hair. And I also teach as part of my Mission Kid Possible, other moderators to work with kids and teens. And I love working with Nicki because she's got a whole great perspective on things. Nicki's going to let me drive, right, Nicki? And then you're going to
just interrupt when I have something to say. Yes.
All right. So, and Nicki's a good interrupter, so it's perfect. Nicki's from Sherbert Research. Nicki, do you want to tell them a little bit about you?
Yes. So I have been running Sherbert for 21 years. I think quite a few people on the call have heard of me and seen me, but yeah, so it's kids and teens as well, predominantly qual. I've got some great quant partners, work globally. Prior to this, I was a primary school teacher many years ago, but yes, so I've been working in research for more than 25 years. And Pam and I have worked together on some really cute little projects, most recently Lego. So yeah, Pam's going to drive. I'm going to kind of chip in because there's times where it's very slightly different in the UK and Europe. But so it's kind of from a US UK perspective mostly here, but we both know about Europe, don't we? So if anyone's got any questions on the European or other global places as well, I've done quite a lot recently in China as well. So just kind of chip in. I'm going to keep an eye on the chat for the questions and decide whether to interrupt Pam or answer the questions at that time. But Pam, off you go.
And thank you. And please have lots of questions. This is a lot of times a US perspective that Nicki's made UK and global. So, if ever you have any questions, chime in on that as well. And pardon my accent, because it probably is very clearly United States. All right. So, kids, they're great respondents. I think Nicki and I both agree on this one. They're definitely the influencers. I know that seems hard to believe, but they oftentimes influence big purchases, including cars. They're not driving them, but they're definitely sitting in them for long periods of time. There's lots of features. I did a project on family vans a while ago, and I was shocked at how much mom and dad are really considering the kids in their purchase of the family vans as well as SUVs. When you think about it, it makes sense. It's like, look, they're going to be in the back. They're going to be like annoying. And how do I make them less annoying? Those kinds of things with different accessories. And I love what this mom said. She drives a car, but they ride in it. And it's definitely true. And, and the same thing with food. A lot of times food and drinks are dictated by the kids. If I hear it all the time. This quote from a US mom is so typical about just if she buys something that the kids don't like, she throws it away. It's a waste of money. So a lot of times what they're purchasing in their grocery bag is definitely what the kids want, even if it's not necessarily healthy. So that's sort of a big view on sort of all the things. There's many other product lines that kids are influential on, and I bet you could list a whole nother group of them, Nicki. So, all right. The big thing for me is to find passionate kids. If they love the subject, they're going to be great respondents. Obviously you sort of work with what you get. If a brief comes that's looking for kids to who are less passionate about it, you're gonna adapt. But if they know the subject, their kids are extremely literal, and so their time frame of memory is very concise. So you have to sort of keep them in sort of the active users group as much as possible. Lapse groups are super hard to do with kids, to keep that in mind. If kids haven't used the product, they're not going to be super passionate about it, nor will they share a lot, because their memory, it's not super long like ours. So just be aware of that when you're
I'll interrupt you here as well. Go on, because I think if you ever have to get lapsed, or if you ever have to speak to them about something like retrospectively, potentially something, you have to do a pre-task. And then they'll have something to, and the same probably for adults, but even more so for kids. So if you know it's something that they're gonna not remember, and actually when you talk about memory, like if you're talking about something they did 2 or 3 weeks ago, especially the really young ones, they won't remember it. They don't really remember what they did at school today when they come home. So it's very important, if you need them to remember, to give them something physical, or they should have done something prior to coming, to they can go refer to help them remember.
I think and I love the whole notion of the pre-task, because the pre-task gets them warmed up. It's really a good thing to do with kids in general. And I agree with you wholeheartedly, is just sort of giving them something to bring to the focus group is going to give them something to talk about right away and to share. Wherever possible, it's a really good idea. But especially with lapse groups, I totally agree, because they've got to get in that mindset, and any way that they can prepare makes them feel more empowered. And I like doing that for kids as a whole, is pre-tasks wherever possible. It's a little bit extra money, but it's always worth it.
Yeah.
So I know that you and I somewhat agree and disagree on this one, Nicki. But I try to recruit for kids who are more sociable. The kids that are active in sports, in church, in debate, in choir, a synagogue, mosque, whatever. I think it's really important that you get that creative kid. And I think that the kids that are even quieter are also sociable. I would argue that just because a kid is outgoing doesn't necessarily mean that they're sociable. Nicki, you and I have had a number of those that are outgoing and not necessarily sociable, or socialized, I should say. And so I do often do in our screeners things like, you get to create a new recipe for cookies that you would love. What will you mix for a kid-friendly cookie? And kids put together the greatest recipes that would never make a good cookie, but are super fun and show sort of a different way of thinking. Even the idea of getting a free day off from school and what's going to make their special day, something in the screener that's going to make them think sort of outside the box instead of just a generic answer, something that's going to sort of trigger that really creative kid. And I don't care if they're if they're introverts or extroverts, the good kid always comes through with those articulation questions. And I usually get great respondents from that. I think 9 out of 10 times, maybe even 9.5 out of 10 times, I get great respondents when I ask 1 or 2 articulation questions of the kids.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I like, you're right. It's not about how loud or quiet they are, but I think it comes also down to asking them, making sure they actually want to be in the session as well, which is something we add, because generally, I think sometimes the quieter kids are fine, and that's why when we'll come on to later, sometimes coming with a friend can or can't help, depending. But I think I think them wanting to be there is a really important part of it as well, and they're not just coming for the money or because their parent has sort of kind of made them. That make sure that the permission is got we're talking, I've got a question here. We're talking about just in-person groups. No, we're talking about both here, actually, whether it's online or whether it's in person. I mean, I don't know if we come on to about online with kids, when we do. A little bit different online, particularly online with young kids. But I think if the child wants to be there, and if they kind of understand that we're going to ask them lots of questions, and we're going to want them to use their brains, and we're going to want them to, you know, use their imaginations depending on what the brief is, then that's great. And being more sociable and being there with people they don't know sometimes is really important for them to know that. Yeah.
And also, you know, that whole, again, with the pre-work, like you had mentioned, Mickey, all of that stuff makes them more comfortable as well in the environment. So sociable, making them sociable and making them more comfortable as much as we can. It's really important to get the right kids in the group.
I've got another question here, but do you have a different approach to who you include in groups based on what's in-person and online? In-person, like in. I mean, I don't like doing lots of kids generally together in person or online. I always feel like 3 or 4 is a max for
small.
both.
I agree with you.
Online with the really little ones, 2 is perfect. I'll squeeze to 3, and I have done 4 online. It's not great. And in person up to 4. I know some people do 6. I don't like more than 4 kids. I don't like more than 4.
I'm generally becoming like almost the same requirements for in-person as online. The only big difference with online is in my screeners, I make sure that they have the right equipment and that the kid is comfortable talking online. And I have some questions in my screener about, you know, their comfort level. But their world is online now. So they don't really differentiate between the in real life and the online. And sometimes it's easier to get them online because mom and dad don't have to drive them. So, you know, to a facility or to their friend's house or whatever. But I mean, generally my recruiting process is the same. I think did we answer the question correctly? Nicki, did we get all that?
We'll come back to it, but I mean, yes, we did. Susan said.
Okay. All right. So, getting onto the recruiting idea is sort of, I really believe that mom and dad need to be your partner. I think you guys say mom and dad, but anyway, I truly believe that the recruiter is really important in this. And in America, not a lot of the recruiters love me when I ask them to not only talk to the parent, but talk to the child. I think over the past decade or so, I think this has become more common practice. It's kind of my evangelistic mission in life is to make sure that recruiters who are recruiting kids actually talk to the kid too, and not just the child, and not just the parent rather, because, you know, kids are going to be the respondent, and there's nothing worse. I've been there than getting the kid that wasn't interviewed, and it's not good. I had a long time ago a Burger King project that the kid was not interviewed, and it turns out did not like hamburgers. Kind of a problem when it's Burger King. So we had kind of an interesting focus group then, and that was purely because the recruiter did not talk directly to the child participant. I usually do it where it's a two-part process where first we talk to the parent, and we ask them about, you know, obviously availability and the household use. Does, you know, your family go to Burger King? Those kinds of things. And then, you know, also their buying process, all the things that the child would not know. And then I talk to the child about their knowledge of the subject. Obviously, they've got to be passionate, and, you know, and some of their ideals around, like, do you like French fries and hamburgers? What do you put on your hamburgers? Those kinds of things, so that I can really verify that the kid likes the food or the product as a whole, and actually uses it. And then you saw some of my articulation examples, but I always have articulation, you know, just to make sure those questions showcase like that they're creative and that they're sociable. And I always ask the mom about their like involvement in outside groups, just so I understand that they're kids who have been socialized. There's nothing worse than a kid that doesn't really is in a focus group and doesn't really interact with kids very well. That's always a real odd dynamic. And so the other thing that I do that's really helpful is I always inform the parent of what's going on. So I create a letter that, introduces me, sometimes with a photo, like, a real estate agent, and it explains sort of the subject in a very generic sense, and also just really ensures that the kids are always respected, and that everything is with their child in mind, and it's in the timeline to make sure that the parents sign on, and really understand that and are your partner all the way through. The really cool thing that here in the United States is it's a harder thing to ask for, but it's really important, is consent letters. I always make sure online, for instance, that like a consent letter pops up, they sign it so that the parent actually logs in, and then the parent has to sign it and say that they are aware that their child is doing this. I do it all the way, like under 18 is really important. Here in the States, like every state has different privacy laws about kids. And so I just make it 18 across the way, and I do it for in-person and online, but online is super easy because you can just pop it up and they can't go any further in things.
16 here, but I still do 18 as well. There's a few questions that have come in. Just
sure.
And this is where like it's discussions, and you and me, Pam, I think feel differently as some of them, but the one was people. So Susan, she does groups with kids, 5 to 6 people, and she finds they all engage. Because someone was saying, do you have different approaches depending on age, and someone's questioned when I said 4 or more. From my point of view, when I do groups with children children and teenagers, to be honest, and this is a personal thing, I don't believe, and I don't like doing groups with more than 4. I will do groups with 6. I do believe that 1 or 2 will sit back, because it's much harder to have a natural conversation, even as an adult. If there's 6 people trying to give their voice, I find it very unnatural. For me, it doesn't mean it's wrong. I don't particularly like it. I like 2s and 3s and 4s. It means everyone gets a chance to speak. And it feels like a more natural conversation. So that is one of the reasons. Doesn't mean I don't agree with 5 or 6s. I would just always prefer to do less. Someone's asked about friendship pairs versus depths versus triads versus that.
Well, yeah, we'll get into that. We do
come back to that.
Nicki and I have different perspectives on that.
Exactly.
But I do agree with you on less is more. But obviously your client in the brief is going to dictate a lot of that. You do sacrifice a lot when you have 6, especially online.
Susan said, you're right. If it's toy research and it's quite a lot of physical stuff and playing, and I think sometimes I've done media research where you're watching a new show, then I probably might have a few more, because if you're doing quite a lot of viewing and then the questions are not that in depth.
Yeah.
But I think as always, and I think I start when I do that, you always start it's client dependent, it's brief dependent, it's time dependent, age dependent as well. So it's all those things. So one more before someone's asked about having adults present. We haven't discussed this before, I don't think, Pam, but like I would never say parents, I won't have parents in the room from about 7 onwards, but that doesn't mean that I shut the door and they can't listen. It means that I want to chat with the kids without mum or dad there, but the door's open. If they want to stand at the door and listen, I wouldn't say that. So there's never a secret. We're not like closing and not listening, but ultimately I think I'm there to speak to the kids unless the parents been
right. Well, and I've done things where, because parents are really interested in what's happening, I've done things where I sort of at the end I have parents come in and have the kids present what they've either created or what they've learned, so that the parents can circle back. And then my client in the back room can actually, if I'm in person, or even in the observer in the back room and in the online, can hear what the parents think about you know, the kid's perspective as well, which is, it's kind of nice. So you can involve the parents in different ways. And it's really important not to close the door. I totally agree with you on that, Nicki.
Yeah, but it's much better than having them sitting there listening. That's what I don't
want them doing that. No.
If they want to
No.
it's not great. I think I've answered all the questions. If I haven't, just write it again and we'll come back to it. But I'll stop interrupting for a bit now.
Okay. So this is by age group, and again, the UK and the US have different divisions here. Your nursery and reception is our pre-K and kindergarten, they're not in daily structured classes, but they love to play. So that's where some of what Nicki was talking about, where you can have, you know, it's really hard to have a lot of kids there, but you can have some, you know, I wouldn't do more than 3 pairs. I'd like to, you really should have mom there because they're young. And that's where mom gets involved. Genders can definitely be together at this age. It's not, they're very young. And so you have to have less expectations and have an opportunity for them to do more physical play. They're much more physical and like it's about touch, and it's not, you can't necessarily sit and do talking heads like we're all used to. First and second grade, which is your year 1 and year 2, I believe. It's their first years where they're sitting in a classroom. They're still active though, and they don't know how to read and write. So my exercises are adjusted per that. I do smaller groups because there's just a lot, you just have to have a lot more tactile things for them to do. And you know, if it's something where it's, again, brief dependent, you know, if it's something that's sort of less familiar subject, or something that needs a little more sort of yin and yang, I say, buddy groups are fine. But for the most part, I think it's really important to, you know, to sort of I like to keep them sometimes, you know, where they don't know each other, because there's some really cool dynamics. And I like to do like triads or pairs, because there's some cool dynamics when they're strangers, you know, looking at a product. They don't influence each other. There's some really fun connections that kids make naturally if I set it up right as a moderator, which is, you know, you're here because you guys are both experts, and, you know, and I know you guys, you both really, you know, can tell me a lot of good things. And it's really good to say something, you know, that might be different. But each one of you have really good ideas. So you're here because you have good ideas. And then I've got just great information from kids, even that young, who don't know each other. Nicki, I know you feel differently about kids that age.
Yeah, I was, again, it's not that I wouldn't do it. It's very rare that I would get kids who are like sort of 5, 6, 7, 8, 9-year-olds without a friend. And I think it's just personal. I think over the years, and maybe it stems back from when I was a child, but I'd never want to go somewhere without a friend. So I always feel, I just feel like again, it doesn't mean I won't do it. And if a client really believes that's what they want, then I would. But I'm of the belief that having a friend often just helps you to relax a bit more, to feel more comfortable in a situation that can feel quite alien. But you know, everyone is different here. Maybe it's a US thing. Yeah, I mean, I know that's when I've done bigger groups, and sometimes it's when they want individuals. And I know sometimes in Germany, for example, because I've done a lot of work recently in Germany, if I say to them, can you get me friendship groups, friendship pairs? No, their recruiters won't do it. Their recruiters, they want individuals. It's much easier to recruit. Doesn't happen.
That's what's happening here. Yeah. I get a lot of pushback from recruiters, and I understand why. It's really, really hard. And I have found actually that buddy groups sometimes hurt the input that we get, the insights, because there's always one buddy that's stronger than the other. And that sort of shuts down one kid, which is too bad. No matter how hard you try, it kind of happens. But this is an age where gender does matter. But if you're going to put 2 strangers together, I just did a presentation at QRCA about gender and how gender really is not mattering as kids get older. It's not, I mean, there's a lot of non-binary, there's a lot of things like that. At this age, it for us, it's still sort of at the young first and second grade, boys and girls still play separately. But if I were recruiting friendship groups, I would probably allow, and I have, allow them to, you know, have anybody that they want. So if they play with a kid that's from a different gender or non-binary, by all means. It's just if I'm putting two strangers together at this young age, I do tend to do gender separate. But this is the only age that I do that because gender has changed so much in what we do. Yeah. And have you seen that too, Nicki, that gender and
much in the UK? So what, you know, it used to be when I would write a proposal, I'd say 4 groups of girls and 4 groups of boys. Now I say equal number of boys and girls, and however that kind of pans out, or equal gender even sometimes, depending again on the project. So there's a lot more, you know, if a girl wants to bring a friend and it's a boy, then great. If it's non-binary, what, you know, ultimately I want as equal as possible, and however that may work. In other countries it's not the same, but I think US and UK are pretty similar in that side of things.
It's evolving. It's definitely evolving. The whole gender thing is evolving. So flexibility is really important. For third and fourth grade, I do smaller groups, and this may be where, you know, Susan's golden age, where she was talking about sort of the 6. I tend to do smaller groups still. I'm kind of on Nicki's side, where I tend to do like 3 or 4 at this age, because this is like this is the golden age of creativity. I love this age. They're really great. They're like 8, 9, 10-year-olds. I do really believe that they should be separate because they're so creative. You don't want to stymie them. And I think, Nicki, you feel differently, but per your point. You know, at this age, I feel like they stand on their own and they're super opinionated. And this is the golden age in my mind. All right. And this is both online and in person. Let me see if I can get in and
Lynn just put, as a recruiter, she finds it tricky. I think if it's an easy recruit, then I will go for friendship pairs or friendship triads. If it's a difficult recruit, when often what I do, just when it is, and I do a lot of work for the BBC who want specifics, but I recruit the lead child to be on spec and then the rest falls out. So then you go back to, as long as they're this, so yeah, it's very difficult if you want to get 2 children or 3 all on the same thing. That's really tough. That's really hard.
Almost nearly impossible. Yeah. So flexibility is really important. So 5th and 6th grade, it's the end of primary for you folks. It's also where it's the end of elementary school for kids in the US, and some kids in 6th grade go into middle school. It's kind of this weird age. It's kind of there's some K through 5 that are primary, and then 6th grade you go into middle school, and there's some K through 6. It's sort of a weird age of transition. Puberty is big time going on, so smaller groups are really important. And I really like to use online as an option for this group because they're super savvy, and I do a lot of cool little tricks, and that may be another knowledge share, but cool little tricks with kids and online. I have a couple of fun tricks for you at the end, and they're really good at Zoom, at you know, Google Meet. They're good at everything online, and they're super good shoppers, really good shoppers. So there's lots of in context exercises that I can do because they're little people. I mean, they really got it at that age. Do you feel differently, Nicki?
No, they're pretty good. Yeah, I mean, same. You know, I think COVID heightened all that, being able to, I think online's a really interesting one anyway. Once the sort of 10 onwards ish, being online for some groups is actually better. And again, always depends on what the brief is and whether you need to actually physically show stuff. But ultimately, it just adds that level of flexibility as well, which is so great for this age group. So we're doing
I did. Do you guys have Shark Tank, the TV show in the UK?
No, Is it a cartoon?
No, Shark Tank is a
Okay.
it's like a show where these like
Sorry to
entrepreneurs.
interrupt. It's Dragon's Den.
Thank you.
Thank you. We do. I didn't know. Dragon's
We
Den.
call it Shark
That's
We
so
call it Shark
funny.
Tank. So I did an
Yeah.
adaptation for this age group and 7th and 8th.
Yeah.
Where I did Shark Tank, sort of where the kids created new programs for my client.
Yeah.
And then they had to sell it to their parents.
Love it.
And
Yeah.
it was a pip. It was so fun, and the kids loved it. And that would had to be in person because there was like a creative vibe, that you can't do in online. It just doesn't work. And they built off of each other, and all those kids were strangers, and they left exchanging phone numbers. They loved each other so much.
Yeah.
So there's ways to sort of do online better at this age, but it's usually around creativity or things that you need to build. 7th and 8th grade, this is the start of secondary for you. It's definitely the start of middle school. I don't think we even have junior high anymore, but some people call it junior high here. I really like pairs and buddies in this age. This is where Nicki, your memories of needing your buddy.
Yeah.
This is a tough age where they really look for acceptance, and you can get a lot of really good information from friends, because they just are so dependent on their friends at this age. Plus mom is giving them freedom. I do a lot of like shopping trips with them. That's really fun. You like go into stores with them with two buddies, and this is where they know what they know a lot, a lot, and and the buddies sort of play off of each other. So this is a good age to sort of work that. And again, like gender doesn't matter at this age, so let the friendship pairs work as they may. And so it could be two girls or two boys, or a boy and a girl, or a non-binary person. Let them work it out, and recruit as that. And I'm very open about that with my clients, because in the US, this is much more like it's becoming very like it's not just trendy, but I think a lot of kids are becoming sort of more open about that. And it's like 1 in 5 kids are LGBTQ plus. So I think my clients tend to agree that at this age group, like gender doesn't matter. 9th grade is a year I like IDIs. I don't know how you feel, Nicki, but they're super active in school and extracurricular. They're super hard to recruit. They're really skeptical, and they're you as an adult are often less exciting than their friends. And so to try to like not have another person in the group, and to really talk clearly with them one-on-one about things, especially something that's a little more sensitive, obviously, but even taste tests I do with them, as much one-on-one, because they're tough. This is a tough group to recruit. It's a tough group to talk to. There's a lot going on. I have a 9th grader right now. It's tough. It's
So
tough.
there is something that's not in here that I've done a lot with this age group. Again, turning on the brief, which I do their moderatorless sessions, where you set up a group of friends in a room with a camera, no adult, you give them all these different tasks, and you get them to do that without you sort of. So it becomes it's very interesting with kids, because then you see the peer dynamic, which sometimes in groups doesn't work great, because the person who is more outgoing might lead, but in a non moderated session, it's very interesting sometimes to see how that pans out. So
I love that idea.
It's great. It requires a lot of work and a lot of checking in and things like that, but I've done stuff on body confidence and lots of things like that, and it was brilliant with this age group. But yeah,
I love that. And they work that way in school collaboratively a lot of time without the teacher's help. So that makes complete sense.
Yeah.
10th, 11th, and 12th grade is high school. They're really adult. And 9th grade is in high school here in the US. It's pre GCSE for you guys, right?
No, just GCSEs year 11. So this is just, so 10 is the year you start your GCSEs, then year 11 is when you do them, and year 12 is when you go into sixth form. So I didn't change, but it's basically the end of sort of school years. And by year 10, which is when they are 15, yeah, you kind of like 15, 16, yeah, with a few adaptations here and there, they're pretty much adults.
Yeah. So it's kind of the same here. I mean, 10th is, yeah, I mean, 10th is, it's just, but they're still in high school, but they're definitely adults there. You can go up to 6 and have no problem. This is all based on a book called Yardsticks by Chip Wood, which is really a child development book that if you're all interested, I think they've updated it. I think Chip Wood just died, but it's a whole foundation here. And it's a really good book about childhood development. And it's tracked with everything that I've done in 30 years of moderating. So, all right. So the interviewing timing, we talked about this. I might have a different viewpoint than Nicki, but the younger ones, I wouldn't go more than 30 minutes. And the early primary, elementary, 30 to 45 minutes. That's your infants group. And then, age 8 to 12, which is late primary, elementary, grades 4 through 7, 45 minutes is plenty of time. I promise you, online or in person. Middle school, I go all the way up to an hour and 15 minutes if needed. You've got to have a lot of different activities. As you can see, there's a lot of ways, a lot of things that they can do both online and in person, with ease. And, post-secondary and high school, I say 75 minutes because they're super busy. It's really hard to recruit them in high school, but if you can get them for 90 minutes, great. I know you in the UK tend to do longer groups, like 2 hours, right?
In Europe, they're even longer. I mean, the reason we do longer and the reason I do longer is purely to allow for late arrival, breaks, all the different things, because ultimately the times you put there are probably the times that they can concentrate for. So I just kind of package that around all the different interruptions or things that might happen to allow not to have to rush. But kind of thing. So the little ones, absolutely. 4 and 5-year-olds, chances are I've got a mum or a dad there or someone to help me, and I'll get the kids for 30 minutes. And then I'll package that in an hour and a half to make sure I've got time to play a bit, talk to the parents, do other stuff. So, and if it's online, it would only be an hour. But so I would never assume I'll get more than that amount of time in one go. But I often do the groups a bit longer to, just allow more time to.
It makes sense. And this is all the more reason that I do pre-tasks with most of my projects, because per your point, like it takes a lot of time to like warm up everybody and all that stuff. And then I also offer an early arrival lottery, so that if people show up at, like when I'm doing in person or even online, if people show up 10 minutes ahead, they are put in a drawing for an extra 25 or 50 bucks. Per group, it makes a huge difference. You'd be surprised how many people are willing to show up 10 minutes early for 50 bucks.
Yeah, I would have done it today.
Exactly. So, and it's a drawing. So it's just, it just costs you 50 bucks per group. Yeah. It's a bad deal. This is kind of my promise for you, like that, sort of the difference between online and in person. Really big thing about in person, because sugar is like crack cocaine to kids. Nicki, I'm sure you will agree. So anything, you'd be surprised what has sugar in it. I'm learning because I'm trying to lose weight, but like, I cannot tell you, like even juice. I mean, I did a juice groups once, that I didn't think about the fact that every single taste that they had of the juice would make them more and more anxious. And like, so we had, and the client wanted 10 tastings. I can't even tell you what those kids were doing when they left the room. I mean, climbing the walls. So just don't give them juice in the waiting room or anything.
Unless they're really quiet, and then they might need.
What?
Unless they're really quiet, and then they might need a bit.
Well, you decide. I'm not. but yeah, no juice, no cookies. That's a general thing that the facilities in the US tend to want to give kids, and I dictate a lot about like pretzels and raisins, not even fruit snacks. Like fruit snacks are full of sugar. I'm a bummer for kids, but they can go have their snacks elsewhere, just not in the waiting room. And I also make sure that there's a place for parents to wait, because again, under 18, I really want parents there, even if they're driving. It's important that parents show up so that we know that they're consenting to this participation and all of that. I always have a host, and I always ask, is there a kid-friendly host or hostess? And I always have some sort of activities for the kids to get into the subject matter, even at the focus group room. Again, it's about the pre-activities, but even if they've done a pre-activity at home, just even if it's something coloring or something that's, just getting them more into this is what you're going to be talking about, it always helps with the warm-up, I promise you. And I've had kids come in proudly showing me their drawings and wanting to talk about it in the introduction. It's a great way to start the role for the client. The client gets really excited. So I use that lobby time in person as much as I can. And then I like to do, like we were doing in when you guys came in, where you guys came in and you could see us, and I call it the romper room, but I'm like, hey, how are you, Matt? How are you? And that's what I like to do with kids. And I also do like stupid things like, oh, Nicki, I see that picture right behind you. What's that picture? Tell me about that picture. So that kids can sort of talk about their surroundings online, just small talk. And it really works. Kids love you just noticing something about them. It's really fun. And I just like to showcase something that makes them that they'd be proud of to share. And really important, especially online, give them something that's easy to share for the warm-up exercise to introduce themselves. Because if it's something that's hard for them to talk about or like more complicated, they'll sort of lose interest, and it's harder online. We've all seen it. Like, a lot of folks have their screens off, their camera off, and then, I make a rule that your camera has to be on, obviously, for a focus group. But you can see kids losing interest a lot easier online, and it's hard to get them back when there's lots of diversions. Yeah.
By the way, Pam, it's 1:45. So
we gotta rock and roll. Sorry. Extra credit. My last slide. I had wow. Sorry, guys. So this is just extra credit for you guys if you want to use it. Here's some in-person tricks. I do a quick draw where they can quickly draw their favorite something, and then they can tell us about it to get them into the subject matter. I ask them for one word to describe something from a focus group, a subject matter that's really fun to get them into the product. And then at the end, I always have something like 3 wishes from a genie, so that they give me 3 wishes that they would want a better version of something that we showed them, an ad or a product or whatever. And then online, I have them oftentimes run and show me something around their house. They have 2 minutes to go run and get it. It's really fun, and it gets them active, and then they come back and they're super proud of what they show. I told you about what's in your background, because that's a pretty self-explanatory. And show and tell. I often ask them to bring something that they, that's weird or different about themselves, and then they talk about it, like this guy. It's super fun, and since they're home, you might as well use the things at home. Those are some of my extra credit stuff to talk to you about, and it's 10:45 my time, 4:45 your time. So just wanted to tell you this is us.
One question here. Given how creative kids can be, are there any best practices around confirming or avoid children lying, making stuff up? Is there an age where you feel this is particularly troublesome? I don't think kids can lie, personally. I mean, first of all, if you've got, this is why I like Friends, because they catch each other out. And I think if you're doing a 45 minutes to an hour group, generally, if they have lied, they trip up. And so I sometimes I mean, I think there's some developmental information about lying. I don't think kids are very good at lying below age 8. And I think above that, I don't. They might lie. I think just if you're not sure, generally, I feel like I sense if they've lied, because, and then they'll contradict themselves, and then I'll nicely sort of re-answer instead of saying, "Oh, you said that earlier, now you said this." I don't want to show them up, but I will continue to question to just see if they slip up quietly. But I don't know. I don't tend to feel like kids are very good at lying in a focus group. So I think if they've been warmed up and if you're having a nice time, they tend to tell the truth.
Yeah, I haven't had a lot of experience with kids lying, and I had one kid that did lie in the beginning, and then just like you said, just eventually I got to what he really meant, and I said,
Yeah.
oh, that makes sense. And then you sort of confirm what you know is the truth, and then you move on. I mean, I think you don't want to call them out, but you definitely, I mean, it's pretty obvious when they lie, and you can just
definitely. And I think sometimes when they lie, it's quite interesting to work out in the analysis why they've lied. If you think, and you're not just doing one group in isolation. So I think that's where, as moderators, we try and work out. We obviously wouldn't know that they've lied as such, but I think sometimes you can either tell, or if not, it's something you do within the analysis. I think that's why it's a skill, being a kids moderator, because I think it's easy. It's a different skill. I think adults are much better at lying. I do. So
I love kids. That's honestly why I love kids, right?
they're much harder. I always laugh. I did some adult groups for a friend at Christmas, and like I asked the question to this group of adults, and 10 minutes later they were still answering the same question. And I'm like, wow, that's amazing. Because when you ask kids a question, if you don't kind of keep focused, you'll be so far away from that question within like 4 minutes. and you won't even know how you got there. But yeah, it's a different skill. That you have to kind of be so focused, but I quite like it sometimes where it goes somewhere else, but you need to bring them back in, because otherwise you won't get any of your answers. But we could talk about this forever, couldn't we?
Yeah, we could. We obviously love what we do. I think I'm happy to answer any other questions offline, and I'm going to put my email again in there. It was on the presentation.
Does anyone want to come online and ask any questions before we go? If further questions? Anybody?
Yes, no answers. There's one here. Is it the same to these? Do you have any thoughts on dynamics of male, female? So the yes, no answer one with teenagers, I know that came up. That's a really interesting one. I think it's a real skill, and I think I make sure when I'm with teenagers or kids, 99.9% of the time, I do not ask a question that has a yes or no answer. You have to be really careful. So you don't say, did you like it? Yes or no. You tell me about that. Tell me in your own words. Talk to me. I don't know, use anything, because if you give children and or teenagers a question that has a yes or no answer, they're not stupid. Why would they not answer yes or no? It's easy. They want the easy route.
Yeah.
So give them a yes.
You don't want to give it to them. Yeah.
So I think always, and if you do that, go, oh, I didn't mean to ask you that question. I need to know a bit more. I need to know a bit more. If they're monosyllabic, that's a whole, we could do another session on monosyllabic teenagers. And I think sometimes in real brief, sometimes they are just monosyllabic. And that goes back to recruitment. It also goes back to, I would come off topic. If you are talking about something that's a little bit boring, come off it and talk about something they like.
It's your job to keep them engaged, and that's
I love talking about PlayStation games with the boys or girls, or start talking about football or something that they're interested in, and then you'll notice if they're still monosyllabic, chances are they are just going to be monosyllabic, and sometimes teenagers just won't talk. But if they start talking to you about football or whatever it's they're into, then you kind of know that the topic you're looking at is probably just not very interesting.
It's not interesting to them. Yeah. Peter has another question about the dynamics of male or female moderators. It does differ by age. I used to have a male moderator like talk to boys, and it's not the case anymore. Like gender's changing right now. It's very, very different. I think keep an eye on that. I have
More
not noticed a difference recently.
sensitive topics, definitely. I think, you know, teenagers,
If
sensitive
you're talking about breast cancer, you're going to talk to women. Yeah. Mhm.
yeah, those types of things. But and I think it's always great if you a good, you know, if you have male and female moderators on a project. It's great if you do. Obviously, there's less men who do kids research, just the same in teaching. But I've got a couple of freelance male moderators, and yeah, you know, I think
they're just as good. I agree. And Andre has, and Andre is one of my former students from Riva. We love him. Andre has one last question about the guidelines around recording and or using video clips and reports.
consent.
Yeah, you got to get consent. You got to get consent. And I only use the first name, no location, no ability to first name and age. That would be all I would do.
I don't use first name. I use boy, girl.
Okay.
Locate. Sorry, yeah. Anyway, I tend to say I'll say
yeah,
boy 11 London or boy 11.
But if you use a location, you can't use the
a big location. So London is massive. I wouldn't say the part of London, or I wouldn't say, I'd say north, which could be Manchester, Leeds, Newcastle. So it sort of gives an idea. But you always just make sure. I've just done something with teachers, which didn't, but I only put the type of teacher because it could identify them if I said where it's from, because the as long as it can't be identified, that's how you so
you really got to be careful about the identifiable stuff. And Andrea, I'm happy to talk to you even on a case-by-case scenario. You can anybody can, you know, email us. Yeah. You want to put your email in the chat, Nicki? So
I think because everyone's ICG here, aren't they? So they could I think they
could find us for sure, but not everybody is ICG. I think
they know
an open invite, right? Lynn, wasn't it an open invite? I think anybody could come in.
So I don't know, because I've been on holiday, so I haven't done anything. I haven't been involved.
That will come up on the recording with pleasure.
Yeah.
Did I spell it right? Because I'm often spell my own. There's too many letters. There's too many letters in my email address. I should next time I do it, I'll make much less letters.
Right. We got one final question, or can we let our wonderful speakers go? Well, thank you so much. It's been brilliant. I really enjoyed it, and I hope everybody else did. And yes, the recording will be available online once Lucy gets it up. And thank you all for attending, and thank you very much for presenting, Nicki and Pam.
Sure.
Really, really good.
Have a good evening, day, or wherever you are, everyone.
I love your background, Joe. I love that looks like a library or something with the thing behind you. That it looks interesting. The little wardrobe behind you.
Oh, here.
It's just not a wardrobe. There's a giraffe, but you can't see the giraffe, so I don't think you can see my giraffe.
No, I see.
Sounds odd now I say that out loud.
Right behind you. Right behind you. It's the shelf that opens.
Have a good
Bye,
day.
guys.
Very much, everyone. Okay.
Guys.
Bye.